Hi, Timothy Unkert here. In this video, we're going to continue with my late 2022 Python tutorial, and I'm going to start by talking about not. I have two other parts so far. I'll leave links to those in the description in case you haven't seen those. Okay, I'm going to stick with the file naming convention I've been using through the previous two videos. So I'm going to name this 015 underscore not. Okay. Also leave a link to the GitHub repo in the description below. Okay, so you can also use not. I'm going to make a comment here. And we were talking about conditionals in the previous video. So we could say something like, if not true, then we could print this is not true. Or else we could print this is true. Okay, so in this case, if we run this, we are going to get this is true down here because not true will be false, meaning else will have to be true. Okay, so we could say something like, if not 3 is greater than 5, print 3 is not greater than 5 because math, exclamation point. Or we could have else print 3 is greater than 5, question mark. Okay, so let's run this. And we of course, we get 3 is not greater than 5 because math, right? Or numbers. So cool. So as always, as I've been explaining in my previous videos, play with this not keyword a bit and get used to using it as you are following along. Okay, and let's move on to our next file, which is going to be about nested conditionals. Okay. Okay, so we're going to have three variables I'm going to create here. One is student, and I'm going to set that equal to false initially. And then age equals 17, and we'll set is gifted equal to true. Okay, we're going to have a bunch of conditionals here. First, we're going to have an if is student. So if this is true, then we're going to execute some code in this block, right? We're also going to have an else. And if is student is false, we're going to execute some other code, right, in this block. So now the way I have it set up here, it's going to execute the else because we have is student is false, right? So we can, create some else condition. So we could say if age is less than 18, well, and if inside of that if statement, if is gifted, if that's true, print something like you finished up high school early. And we could do an else, and we could print stop skipping, bro. And if the age is greater than 18, let me see if this will indent this properly. We want to actually back here. What I'm going to say is print something like you are working, hopefully. Okay, so that's if they're not a student. Let's add some code if they are a student, and then we'll play around with a couple conditions here. So let's say if the age is less than 18, and we're going to use an and keyword. So now we have to have two conditions that are true, and age is greater than or equal to 14. Well, what we're going to do is we are going to print you are in secondary school. Okay, we'll do an elif here, so a nested elif, and we got to give a condition. Age is less than 14. And we want to say also and age is well, no, actually, yeah, if age is less than 14, this will work. Thinking through this in my mind. Print something like you are in primary school. Okay, so I'm going to change these first three variables as I run different conditions, and we'll see which branch we go down. And then we could have another elif, which is age is greater than 18. Now, we probably don't need the elif. We probably could use an else, but you can. This illustrates you can use an elif or two elifs without an else if you want to. You are in college. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got some conditionals here. Let's run this program and see which branch we go down. So we see we finished up high school early. Why did we do that? Well, is student is false, so we go down to this branch on the conditional, the outer conditional first. Then the age is 17, so its age is less than 18, so we go to this code block, okay? Then we have is gifted is equal to true, so if it is gifted, and we print this part of the code out, and we ignore everything else, okay? Now, let's change this to false, is not gifted, okay? So change it to false, and we get stop skipping, bro. Okay, so again, we're down this else condition. The age is less than 18, but we're not if is gifted, so we have stop skipping, bro. But if we change the age to 18 here, what do we get? You are working. Okay, why is that? Well, now we're still in the else conditional here, but the age is 18, so we go to this else and print you are working. And let's change is student here to true, and the age to 17 here, and we get you are in secondary school. So now it's if is student is true, it goes up to here, it meets this first condition and prints it out. Okay, and we could also change this to 19 here, run it, and now it says you are in college because it meets this condition down here. So that was an example of nested conditionals for you. I would play with this if I'm learning Python and experiment with the different branches you can go down. That'll help you learn. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is while loops. So I'm going to call this one 017. We'll do while loop. Okay. And we're going to define a loop variable up on top. We're going to say keep looping equals 1. Okay. And we'll have this while loop, and we're going to loop while something is true. So while keep looping, now a truthy value in Python, let's talk a little bit about that. A truthy value in Python is if you're talking integers, it's any number but 0, okay? So if it's 1, it'll keep looping. It'll be true. If we make it 0, it's going to stop. Okay, so we're going to print we are still looping, okay? And then we'll do an input for keep looping, and we'll say it's an integer. Do an input, do you want to keep looping? And we'll say 0 for no, 1 for, let's move this down, yes. Okay. And let's move this over. I think this is going to format a little weird if I don't do that. Okay. All right. So do you want to keep looping? 0 for no, 1 for yes. Okay. All right. Let's run it. Do you want to keep looping? 1 for 0, 0 for no, 1 for yes. Let's add a parentheses here and just rerun it. Let's stop it here for a minute. Okay. Let's run. Do you want to keep looping? 0 for no, 1 for yes. I'm going to put 0, okay? And we stop, all right? But if I run it again and I do 1, we are still looping. Do you want to keep looping? Yeah, we're still looping. Want to keep looping? And I can keep doing that. I could actually do probably any number here, like -12, something like that. It'll still loop. But if I press 0, it's a falsy value, and it will stop. Okay. Another way we can use this, let's just comment this part out. Another way we can use this is with an index. So we could say something like index equals 0. And I could have a while loop. I could say, while my index is less than 100, we'll print the index. Now I'm going to show you what happens if I don't increment the index right now. So let's run it. And we see it's still running. It's just going along. And I'm going to hit stop. And we were basically in an infinite loop where it was just printing 0 because we're not changing the index. So it's always less than 100. So we want to make sure we don't do that. And we're going to do index plus equals 1. So that's going to be like index equals index plus 1. It's going to increment it. Now if we run it, we get 0 through 99 printed out down here. Okay, so we can iterate through a bunch of numbers with a while loop with this method. Okay. All right, next up, let's keep going. And I'm trying to make these kind of quick, so you can always pause the video if I'm going too fast, go back, rewatch it, etc. All right, next file, we're going to call it 018a because I'm going to talk a lot about lists over the next few videos. So we can create a list by just using square brackets. We can say my list equals, and I'm just going to do a numbers list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do want to note a list can contain different types. So I can do something like my other list equals, we'll do a string of dog. We'll do number 5. We'll do a string of cat. We'll do a Boolean value true, do a Boolean value false. We'll do a value of none, and we'll do another string of horse. Okay, all valid. We can do this. Okay, and what we can do is we can now loop through the list. So we could say something like for item in my other list here. Let's just print the item. This is perfectly valid. Okay, so you can see that because I get that green check mark. My ID is telling me you didn't mess up. Sweet. All right, so let's run this, and it prints out each value. So dog, 5, cat, true, false, none, horse. Okay, so you can do different types. That was my little intro to lists, and now let's get to more interesting stuff with lists. So let's create another file. I'm keeping these files small. Again, they're going to be on GitHub. I'll leave a link in the description. So we'll go to 018b and do, also call this one lists. Okay. And in this one, let's create a names list. So I'm going to create let's just call it names. Okay. And let's do Tim, Sarah, Sean, Joe, Chet, Barry, and let's do Aaron. Okay, so we have our names list here. And now what I want to do is I want to print the first item of the list. Okay, so the first item in a list is the item at index 0. So we can print names at index 0, and that's going to give me the first item on the list, which is Tim. Okay. Also, I'd like to print the last item on the list. Okay. To do that, I can use a -1 for my index, and that will print the last item on the list. So print names at position -1. Let's run it, and we get Aaron. Cool. Okay, so Aaron is the last name on the list. Okay. We can also use the in keyword in the list. So we want to check if an item is in a list. So what I can do is I could print names, or actually no, getting ahead of myself, I could print Sarah in quotes because it's a string in names. Okay. Now this is going to return a Boolean value, and it returns the Boolean value true because Sarah's in the list. So this is true. Okay. So let's do this with another one. Let's print John in names. Okay. And this should be false because we don't have John in names. So if we run this, the last value we get is false. Okay. We can also use not here as well. So we could check if an item is not in a list. So we can print, let's print Tim not in names. Now this is going to yield false because Tim is in names. Right? So if I run it, the last value is false. Okay. But we could do something like print, and we'll use John above, John not in names. Okay. And this is going to yield true because John is not in names. Okay, and it yields true. And one cool thing here, if you'll notice, is that this Python syntax is very English-like. It's very understandable. And I think it's why a lot of people like Python is because you're basically writing it, it's fairly straightforward what the code is doing. We are checking if the name is not in the list. So pretty straightforward, pretty cool stuff. Okay, and we're going to continue with another file talking about list slicing. So let's do that. So we're going to do a new Python file here. Call it 018c underscore lists. And we're going to talk about list slicing in this video. We'll create another names list. Let's do Tim, Sarah, Sean, Joe, Aaron, Matt, and Barry, let's say. Okay. All right. So as with strings, when we do string slicing, that was in, I believe, the second part series video, we have a start, a stop, and a step when we slice through a list. Okay, so let's start off with something fun, and let's reverse the list with list slicing. So we'll reverse the list and print it out. Okay, so I'm going to do print, and we'll do names. And to reverse it, I'll leave the start empty, I'll leave the stop empty, but I'll leave the step as -1. Okay, so we're going backwards through this list as a way to think of it. And you'll see it prints out the list, Barry, starting with the last name, Barry, Matt, Aaron, Joe, Sean, all the way to the first name in the list, Tim. Okay, so we can go through and go in reverse. Okay, let's print the first 3 items of the list. Okay, so the default start is at the first index. So we're going to leave that blank because we want it to start at the first index. We're going to stop at 3. So the stop is actually, if we're thinking of indexes, the stop is one above. And we're going to leave the step blank because the default step is 1. Okay. If I print this, I get Tim, Sarah, and Sean. Okay. So I've printed the first 3 names in the list. All right. Let's now print the last 3 items of the list. Okay. So what we can do here is we can print names, and we can do -3 as our stop. We'll end it at the end of the list, and we'll step through with the default. So now the way we were thinking about this, if we want to print the last index in the list, and we saw this in the last file, we'd use -1, right? So this is -1, this is -2, and this is -3. So the start rather should be at -3 here. And then we go to the end, so we leave that one blank, and we step up by 1. So we just go -3, -2, -1. Okay. So we'll print that. We get Aaron, Matt, and Barry. Cool. All right. Let's print every other name in the list. So we'll print every other name in the list. Okay, we can do that. We can print names, and we can start. We'll leave the default in the end, but the step will be 2. Okay, so if we run this, we see that at the bottom here, we get Tim. Let's go back up to the list here. So we get Tim, Sean, Aaron, and Barry. So Tim, skip Sarah, Sean, skip Joe, Aaron, skip Matt, and Barry. Okay, so we've stepped over. Let's go in reverse, printing every other name. Okay, so to do that, we'll print names, leave the first 2 blank, and we'll do a -2 here. Okay, and now we get, let's go back up here, we get Barry, we jump over Matt to do Aaron, jump over Joe to do Sean, and jump over Sarah to do Tim. Okay, so we've done it in reverse. All right, so I'm just going to make a comment as you're watching this. Hey, play with this a bit. So you can stop the video, play with it, so you really get a good feeling with what's going on with list slicing. Okay. All right. Next up is we're going to do some list iteration. Okay. So we're going to do, let's do a file. Let's call it 018 d list.py. You're going to let me create a new one. No, sorry. I'm just going to go over here. Just trying to be fancy. All right, new Python file. Let's do 018d_lists. Remember to include the .py file if you're not using an IDE to do this. All right, and let's talk about list iteration in this video. We're going to create our names list. We'll do Tim, Sarah, Sean, Joe. I want to get a bunch of names here. Aaron, Matt. Let's do Barry. Notice how I moved down to the next line there. Something you can do. And Chet. Okay. All right. So that makes it a little bit more readable. All right. So let's just iterate through the list like normal. I've done this maybe once or twice already in the series, but we could say something like for name. We can call this whatever we want. We could call it X if we want, but you want to be kind of descriptive about the variable you're giving it. So we could say something like for name in names list. Well, we can print the name. Okay. So if we do that, and we don't have a names list, we just have names. Okay. If we do that, I might have named it names list on the GitHub repo. That's where I was thinking about that. But anyways, we can go through and we go through Tim, Sarah, Sean, Joe, Aaron, Matt, Barry, and Chet. Okay. All right. So that's a typical iteration. Let's comment that out. And let's try iterating through in reverse. So let's iterate in reverse. And I'll show you one way to do this, and maybe later I'll show you a different way. But I'm going to do this with list slicing, what we just learned. So to reinforce that, so I'm going to say for name in names. And I'm going to leave the start and the stop the same, but step through with the -1. So step through in reverse, and we'll print the name. Okay, we'll run that, and we've got, now we start with Chet, Barry, Matt, Aaron, all the way to Tim. So we've reversed the list with list slicing, and we've iterated through the values. Okay, let's comment that one out. Okay. Next one, let's iterate through every other item in the list. So we could say something like for name in names, and do leave the start and the stop the same, but leave the step as 2 to step through every other one. And we can print the name like so and run it. And now we've got Tim, Sean, Aaron, and Barry. So we skip, Sarah, Joe, Matt, and Chet. Okay. All right. So that's every other one. Comment that one out. Let's see what we have next. Okay, we could do reverse every other item. So reverse iteration through every other item in the list. Okay, so we could say for name in names, and we could do the start and the stop the same and give it a -2 step and print the name. And if we do it that way, we start at Chet. Okay, so this case, we start at Chet, we skip Barry, go to Aaron, skip Joe, go to Sean. Oh, wait a minute, I messed up, sorry. Chet, skip Barry, go to Matt, skip Aaron, go to Joe, skip Sean, go to Sarah, and skip Tim. Okay, so that's in reverse. Okay, and then I'm going to show you one more method in this file before we create a new file. And this one's going to be just more of a iteration in a less Pythonic way, but it's a way to do it. So we could say for I in range length of the names list. And what we could do is print names at index I. Okay, so this range, and I'll explain more about ranges in a moment, but we're going to start, the range starts at 0, goes up to 1 less than the length of the names, which is good because, indexes in Python start at 0. So if I run this, I just get each item of the list. It's a little less Pythonic way, a little harder to understand what's going on here than something like for name and names, print name. Okay, that's a little bit more easier to understand. Okay, but that's another way to do it. Okay, actually one more for this. Well, actually, I made an 18E, and it was a really short file, but whatever. I'll just make an 18E, kind of be consistent with the GitHub repo. So we'll call this lists, and again, we have this names list, and it's Tim, Sarah, Sean, Joe, Aaron, Matt, Barry, and Chet. Okay. All right, and this is another way to reverse the list. So another way to reverse and iterate through the list. So we could do something like for name in reversed names, okay? And then we could print the names, or print the name, rather. So we can do this. This will work. And this is going to go start at Chet and go all the way back to Tim, okay? It was a very small file I created there. All right, so let's talk about appending and also extending lists. So we can go to a Python file here, 018f _lists. And we're going to talk about appending. So let's start with a short names list. We'll just have Tim, Sarah, and Sean. And we're going to print our names. So we'll just print it out. Okay, so we get Tim, Sarah, Sean, and now we're going to change it a bit. So we're going to append to lists, or append to the list. And with appending, we can only add one item at a time. Okay, so let's take names, and we'll do a dot. And you see when I do the dot, I get a bunch of methods that come up that I can use. I'll start to type A, and I have append, and I can hit tab and extend that. And now I'm just going to type the item that I want to append, and that's going to be the string Joe. Okay. Now if I print names, and run, we get Tim, Sarah, Sean, and Joe. Okay, so that works well for adding one item at a time, and there's plenty of circumstances where you want to do that. But if you want to add more than one item, you can use extend, okay? And that allows us to add multiple items at once, okay? So what we can do is we can do names.extend, and then we can pass in a list to add on. So we could do something like Matt, Barry, and Chet, okay? And now what we can do is we can print the names, all right? So if we run this, we now see that the names list has not only Joe that's been added on through the append method, but Matt, Barry, and Chet who have been added on through the extend method, all right? So that's a little difference between extend or append and extend. Also want to talk about how we can get rid of items in the list. So let's talk about pop. So what I could do is I could do, say, the last name equals names, and this is a method, so I do dot and then pop, okay? And I'm not going to pass anything in, although I can pass in something. And what I can do is now print the last name. And if I run this, I'll see the last name is Chet. It's popped off that last name. Now, if I print the names list, let's run it. And we notice we don't have Chet anymore. So this persists. Okay, so once we do this, it gets popped off. So it's off now. Okay. All right. Let's talk about pop with an index. Okay, so let's say we want to get the third name in the list. And we want to get it, save it to a variable, and then get rid of it from the list. So we can say third underscore name, or whatever you want to call the variable, equals names, dot pop. And remember, it's a zero-based index, so to get the third item, we're going to take the second index. Okay, so we can print the third name. And let's also print the names list after we do that. And we can see the third name is Sean, and now we can see in this names list that Sean is gone, okay? So the pop, that persists, okay? Okay, and I think that's all I wanted to talk about in this video, or in this file, not in the video. Don't leave. We still got some more to go. I'm going to talk one more thing about lists before we move on to enumerate. Okay, so we're going to do new, which also we can use with lists, but we're going to be done with the file 018 various letters. So we're going to do 018g underscore lists, create a names list. So we'll say names equals Tim, Sean, Joe, Aaron, and Chet, okay? And we're going to clear a list. So let's clear a list, okay? So we're going to print names.clear, and we'll see what this returns. This will be interesting. So if we see this, this actually returns none. So it's a method that returns none, okay? The dot clear is a method that returns nothing. But what does it actually do to the names list? So let's print out the names list and run it. And we see that our names list here is we just see the opening and closing square brackets. So it's cleared out our list, which makes sense. Python is very, it matches up with English very well. Okay, so let's add before we move on. So let's add. So we can take the names and we can do dot extend. Okay, and I'm just going to take this, copy that, and just pass it in there. Okay, cool. And now we'll print out our names list and make sure we're back to normal. Okay, so we've cleared it. Now we added the names list back in by extending. Okay, cool. And now let's remove the first item on the list and assign it to a variable with pop. Okay, so let me show you a few different ways to do this. So we're going to remove the first item of the list and assign it to a variable with pop. Okay, so we can say fname for first name equals names.pop, pass in the index of 0. Let's print the first name, and let's print the names. Okay, if I run this, we see down at the bottom here, so the first name is Tim, and now Tim has been popped off the list as well. Okay, all right, so that's one thing we can do. Another way to remove the first item of the list, so in this case, we're just going to remove the first item, and it's not going to be Tim anymore, it's going to be Sean. Just going to remove the first item. So we'll just in parentheses Sean here. And we're not saving it to a variable, but we're just removing it. We can say del for delete names at index 0. And now let's print the names. Okay. So if we do that, we see we just deleted it, and now we just have Joe, Aaron, and Chet. Okay. We can also use the remove method. Okay, so let's talk about the remove method. So we can do something like names.remove, and we'll just pass in an actual value. We don't have to pass in an index, but let's say we want to remove Chet from the list. We can do that. Let's print out the names here. And we see we just have Joe and Aaron. Okay. At this point, what I'm going to do is extend the list a bit. I'm going to say names.extend. Let's pass in a list. Let's do John. Let's do Sally. Let's do Mark. And let's do Kelly. Okay, so we'll extend our names list. Let's print out the names list extended here. So we get Joe, Aaron, John, Sally, Mark, and Kelly. Cool. Okay. All right. And let's now talk about one more thing here. Let's talk about inserting into a list. Okay. So we can do the names.insert. And let's insert at index 2. Let's insert the name Billy. Okay. So this is going to print out names, and then we're going to insert Billy, and let's print out the names again. So let's see what the last two lines look like. Okay, so we got Joe, Aaron, and then we extended the list with John, Sally, Mark, and Kelly. And then we inserted Billy into index 2, which is the third item on the list. So now we have Joe, Aaron, Billy. John moves to index 3. We have Sally, Mark, and Kelly. Okay. Okay, so that's lists. Next video, let's briefly talk about enumerate. So I'm going to make this 019. So we'll do 019 here. And do enumerate. Okay. And let's create a names list. So we'll have names equals Tim, Sarah, Sean, Joe, Aaron, Matt, Barry, and Chet. Okay, so we've got our names listed there. And we'll say enum1 equals enumerate. Okay, and we'll pass in names. And what I'm going to do down here is just print the enum1 as a list. Okay, so we're going to make a list and print enum1 and see what this returns. Okay, so if I do that, we see we get 0, Tim. These are both in parentheses. I'll explain that in a moment. 1, Sarah. 2, Sean. So it's a list of these two items grouped together in parentheses, and they are grouped together as a tuple. Okay, we haven't talked about tuples yet, but let's just make a comment here that this, what am I doing? Returns a list of tuples with the index and value of the list item. Okay, it's a little bit of a long line, but that's basically what it's doing. All right, so we're returning, the index and the value inside of a tuple. We've made it a list here. Okay. So that's enumerate. Got a couple more files within this video series, part 3. All right, so we're going to do new Python file. I'm going to call this 020 underscore, we'll do for range. Okay, so we've seen this a little bit already, but we want to do a for loop with a range. And what the range has is it has a start value, a stop value -1. It's a little different. And then we can also increment it. Okay, so let's do a few things. So let's increment by 2 through some numbers. So let's do 1 through 100. So the way I would do that, so let's do 1 through 100. Okay, so I would do 4. We can say num, or we could say I, or we could say index. I'm just going to use I. So for I in range, we'll start at 1, go to 1 higher than 100, so 101, and we want the step of 2, and let's print I. Okay. Now, if we go ahead and run this, and we scroll up, we start at 1, jump to 3, 5, 7, etc., go all the way up to 99. Okay, and we're jumping every other one, so we don't do 100, but we're jumping all the way through. Okay. All right. One more example I wanted to show you is just let's increment in reverse. Okay. So increment in reverse from 100 to 1. Okay. So we can do for I in range. Now we want to start at 100. We want to stop at 1 less than, in this case, 1 less than 1. So we're going to stop it, have the stop be 0, and then the step will be -1. Okay. And we can print I in this case. All right. So let's run this. Whoops, and I forgot in. Okay, so you'll see I get exit code 1, and I get a syntax error. So that's a different type of error. We've seen type error and a few others. That's a syntax error. So I have to have for I in range. Okay, so now let's run it. All right, so if we scroll all the way up, we see stop the previous for loop at 99, and then we start at 100, and we go down all the way to 1. Okay, so that's a little bit about for and range. Last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is break and continue, and I'm going to talk about them with a while loop. Okay, so we'll say 0 to 1 while, and call this break continue. Okay, and let's create an index variable, set that equal to 0 for our while loop. And what we'll do is we'll print a loop 1 through 10, but skip 7. And we're going to do this with continue. So I'm going to say while index is less than 10. What I want to do is, actually, I want to print 1. Better start with, no, this will work actually, because I want to, let's increment it before. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do index plus equals 1. So we're going to increment it to start. And we're going to say if index double equals 7, then we'll continue. And what this basically means is we're going to stop the loop at this point and jump back up here. Okay. But below the continue, outside of the if statement, I'm going to have a print index. And what's going to happen is when it gets to 7, it's going to hit continue. It's going to jump back up. That's going to go to 8. And that's going to go down and print 8. So it's going to skip 7. It's going to skip printing 7. Okay. So if I run this and we look, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. So we've skipped 7. Okay. Let's also talk about break. So demonstrate break. So I'm going to say something like while true. So this would loop forever, really. We'll say keep looping equals an integer. And we'll have an input, and we'll say, do you want to keep looping? And I'm just going to do a 0/1, a question mark and a space there. And I'm going to say if keep looping double equals 0. I'm going to put a colon there. I'm just going to do break. Okay. And that's going to break the loop if it equals 0. Okay. So let's run this. Okay. So we're down here at the bottom here. We've run through our loop here. And then we said, do you want to keep looping? If I do 1, it's going to keep looping 1. If I do anything besides 0, but when I hit 0, it's going to break. Okay, it breaks out of the loop. So that's break and continue. And that's all I wanted to cover so far in part 3. Part 4 will be coming soon, of course. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, could you please give it a like, as it will help get out to more people. And also consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. That really helps the channel grow, and it motivates me to make more videos like this. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.